Today we're at Mobile Dev Day in Detroit. My guest is Matt Groves. Matt, how are you?
David, good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I enjoyed your talk on Android, on actually Monodroid. Let's talk about Monodroid a little bit. You're actively doing development in that platform, right?
Yes, I am. So Monodroid is a way to write apps for the Android platform using the open source .NET implementation known as Mono for the Android platform. So you can write your app in C# for Android.
Okay. So I'm familiar with Mono a little bit. It's controversy whether it's Mono or Mono. Is that the same controversy exists when you say Monodroid versus Monodroid?
You know, I heard Miguel on some other podcasts, and I swore he said Mono. But apparently it's officially known as Mono. So
Mono is Spanish for monkey, I think.
Yeah, right. So I just say Mono until someone corrects me. So.
All right, we'll call it Monodroid for the purposes of this show.
Okay.
All right, so Mono's been out for a long time, and it's been essentially a port of the .NET framework, just a few months behind the release of the same libraries in .NET. Monodroid has only been out for how long?
Monodroid went to private beta, I think, mid last year, mid 2010, and it's been going on since then in private betas and now public betas.
Okay.
So it's available to anybody to use for free.
For free, okay. That's not going to always be true. I think they're going to charge for this.
That's correct. So once they actually release, they'll probably start charging for it. Very similar to what they've done with Mono Touch, just similar product for iPhone.
Okay. So let's talk further. How do you get it? There's a URL to download from for free.
Sure. Go to monodroid.net, and you can go there and download the latest Monodroid, essentially a plugin for Visual Studio. You'll still need to install all the standard Android Java stack stuff, so the Java SDK, down to the Android SDK and platform tools, and you'll need to set up a simulator, emulator stuff to develop it on top of that. So all those steps are the same as normal Android development.
Okay.
But instead of using Eclipse, you're using Visual Studio with a Monodroid plugin.
Okay. All right, so I downloaded all these things, the SDKs for Java, the SDKs for Android, the simulator, so that I can actually pretend I have a phone on screen, and Monodroid itself. And of course, I have to have Visual Studio installed. Do I need the full version of Visual Studio?
I don't know if it works with the free version they have, but it does have to be 2010. It does not work in 2008.
Okay. And then I'm ready to go. Now I can select. Walk me through the process.
Yeah, okay, so once you have all those steps done, and that's not a trivial process at all. Getting the Android SDK stuff especially can be very tricky.
What are the tricks? What kind of problems you run into?
Some of the problems is if you install it in a certain folder, a certain name, everything will work right. If you do it in a different folder, it might give you some problems.
Okay, so
just set environmental variables.
Follow those instructions exactly as they are.
There's lots of guides to this out there, but it can be tricky and frustrating.
Okay.
But once you've got all that installed, you've got the Monodroid package installed, you can just do a File, New project in Visual Studio, and you'll have a couple different types of projects available, but there's a main Monodroid application project you can create. And once you do that, you'll get a very simple Hello World project right out of the box. You can run it right there, and it's just a click the button and it increments a counter.
Okay.
So you don't have to find an example code somewhere. It comes with it right out of the box.
Okay. And then you modify that. You delete the code that's there, and you replace it with your own code. That's great. Just gives you an example of how to call it.
Right.
Let's talk. So there's a couple pieces to this. There's going to be a user interface that the user will see. Of course, it'll be small, the size of a phone.
Yes.
And there'll be some code that's going to run to perform your business logic.
Yes.
Is there, for the user interface, is there a designer that I can drag and drop controls, or do I do that through code, or how does it look?
Right now, there's not a designer built into Monodroid. There is a designer available, an open source one called Droid Draw.
Okay.
It's not really a final product yet. It's not really robust yet.
Okay.
It's a tool that might be helpful for some people, but at this point I found that just writing the XML out yourself is much quicker and easier to do.
Okay, so it's XML is what we're doing to define the layout and the controls are.
Each layout in Monodroid for the UI is an XML file. It's very similar in structure to XAML, if you're familiar with Silverlight or WPF type of designs, where you just put in a layout and you can put what are called views inside the layout. So like a button is a view, a list view is a view, and things like that.
Okay, those are built-in views that ship with the framework.
That's correct.
Okay, so the way of building a Monodroid application is to manipulate XML. That's how we That's how we start.
Yeah, so that's how you start creating the UI, is by just creating the one or more layout files
Okay.
for screens that the user will see.
And each file represents a given view, I guess. Is that so?
Well,
if you move from one, in other words, if you click a button and you go to a different page, I'm using a web paradigm here.
Yeah.
That would be a different file.
Generally speaking, that's true. Yes. Now, it doesn't have to be the case that each layout corresponds to a view, but generally that's the way that I've written apps. Is you have each part of an Android app is called an activity, and then each activity generally corresponds to one layout or one main view.
Okay.
For that activity.
All right, it's hard to show code on this show, but we're speaking conceptually now. Where does code fit into this then?
Okay, so like I said, each part of an Android app is an activity. This is true in Monodroid as well. So you'll start by creating an activity class, and usually you'll have a main activity. This is where you start your app out.
All right.
And they're kind of analogous to, in my mind, some .NET guy, they're analogous to forms in WinForm.
Okay.
So you create an activity.
So the main activity is the main entry point for my application.
Yes, this is the first activity that will be created when you launch the application.
Okay.
So in that activity, you'll have you can set a layout in the activity. So one of the layouts you've created in the XML, you can set that to the initial view that the user will see in that activity.
And we're writing C# or VB code at this point?
I believe it's only C# right now. There's been some talk about doing VB in other languages, but I don't think that's for sure yet.
Okay.
So then once you have the activity going and now you have a UI that's shown to the user, you can start putting data into various parts of the view. So text views will hold text, list views will hold lists. You can also wire up events to the buttons.
How does that work?
It's very similar to a .NET form where you get a reference to the button and you set an event on it, like an on-click event.
All right.
Now getting the button itself is a little different than like a WinForms style model. Is Monodroid will take those layout files, those XML files, and each ID you specify for them, and it will generate a class which is just a collection of constant integers that sort of act as a handle to those various views.
Okay, so you need to refer to the elements on your screen by this integer, this handle.
Well, to get it for the first time you do, yes. Okay. So you say, give me the button that corresponds to this integer, and it will return a button object to you.
And then even like that button object. Okay, and the file you're talking about is basically a list of friendly names for those integers.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I get it.
And that's all generated by Monodroid.
Okay. I'll keep going.
Okay. Then you have events right up to your buttons at this point. You have data on the screen. And so you might want to move to another activity, for instance. So it would be an option. You could create what's called an intent object and pass that off to the Android operating system. And it will go and fetch you a new activity and pass some data to it. And it'll serialize the data and pass it to that other activity. And then you can start doing something else from there. More buttons, more views, more lists, more data.
Okay. Now, if I have access to the C# code, I have access to anything that C# can do. Is that right? In other words, I can call out to web services.
Oh, yes. So you can make a web request. You can call WCF services. You can interface with persistence, all those things.
How do I handle persistence? How do I?
So there's lots of
phones are notorious for not always being connected.
Yeah, that's true. So the built-in way with Android is SQLite. You can create a database that Android handles very well with SQLite, and that's what I did for my app that I'm working on. So you'll just create a helper class that will create the database tables for you when the app is first run, and then you can make, inserts and selects and deletes just like a standard SQLite database to that data.
Is that installed? Is SQLite installed with Monodroid?
You'll get the SQLite APIs with Monodroid, but SQLite itself is already installed on your Android phone.
Oh, it is? Okay, I didn't realize that. And you mentioned the XML is the way that you can define your layout. You can also define it through code, right?
Right. So another thing you can do is you can just create the object yourself in the code and display them to the user that way. So if you want to dynamically generate some parts of your view, you can certainly do that.
So I can start with a shell or a template using XML, and then maybe dynamically add buttons or add list items.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Now, I would tend to not do that very often unless I really have to. Just like WinForms, I wouldn't want to create new UI objects just on the fly unless there's a really good reason for it.
Okay. What else? People get started. How can you help us?
Well, I've got some sample code out there. My project I've been working on is just a really simple app that calls out to a web service and shows data to the user, and that's available on GitHub. And
Okay.
I'll give you the link. You can post it on your show notes or something
Yep.
if you'd like to. That's a great way to get started. Before that even, you might want to check out some of the examples at monodroid.net. They have a bunch of Hello World examples to show you the basics of doing various views and working with the life cycle of an Android app.
All right, and you're blogging about this as well, right?
Certainly, I blog from time to time, mgroves.com, about Monodroid, how my app's coming, and things that I've learned and such.
All right, Matt, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, David. Some of my best friends are technology.